On a quiet world forgotten by time and star charts alike, the wind moved through dry grass like a sigh. The sky held two pale moons, one large and cracked, the other small and sharp like a sliver of bone. Beneath them stood an old man named Ellis. His hands were rough from years of turning soil, and his face lined like a map of old battles. He lived alone in a small stone house built near the edge of a dead forest. Once this place had been called New Oregon. Now it had no name at all. Earth had pulled its people back decades ago after the Great Silence. No one spoke of it much anymore. The colonies that survived did so by forgetting. Ellis never forgot. He remembered the hum of dropships, the crackle of comms, the weight of a rifle in his hands. But those days were buried under layers of dust and quiet. Now he grew carrots and beans and sometimes watched the clouds move like slow ships across the sky. He had no neighbors. The nearest ruin was 50 miles east. A broken dome where vines now climbed through shattered viewports. Animals avoided the area. Even the birds seemed uneasy there. Ellis never asked why. Some things were better left sleeping. One evening, as the larger moon rose high in silver, he sat on his porch sipping bitter tea from a chipped mug. The air smelled of dry earth and something faintly metallic. Then the sky split. A streak of violet light tore through the clouds, trailing smoke and silence. No roar, no warning. Just a sudden gash in the heavens that widened until a ship fell through it. It was sleek and black like a blade turned edge on to the world. It hovered above the dead forest, then settled without a sound. Ellis did not move. He set his mug down slowly and watched. 3 figures emerged. Tall and slender, they moved with a grace that felt wrong. Their skin shimmered like wet stone and their eyes glowed faintly silver. They wore armor that seemed grown rather than built, shifting subtly as they walked. They carried no visible weapons, but their presence carried weight like a storm about to break. They approached his house with long strides. When they stopped 10 feet from the porch, their leader tilted his head. His voice was smooth and cold like water over glass. "You are human," the leader said. "The last of your kind here." Ellis nodded once. "I am." The 3 aliens exchanged glances. Then they laughed. It was not a human laugh. It had no warmth, no humor. It was the sound of something sharp scraping bone. "Your species is extinct," the leader said, still smiling. "Earth burned. Your fleet shattered. Your children scattered like ash. You are a relic. A ghost wearing skin." Ellis said nothing. He looked past them into the dark trees. Something stirred there. A flicker of green. A breath held too long. The aliens noticed nothing. They turned to leave, already dismissing him. But then Ellis spoke. "You may be predators," he said, his voice low but steady, "but we're survivors." The words hung in the air like smoke. The leader turned back slowly. His smile faded. "You speak as if you matter." "I speak as if I remember," Ellis said. From the tree line behind him, the shadows shifted. Not like wind. Not like animal movement. This was deliberate. Ancient. 2 eyes opened in the dark. They glowed soft green like moss under moonlight. The aliens froze. A woman stepped forward. She was tall but not as tall as the Virith. Her skin held the color of birch bark, pale and smooth. Her hair fell like strands of silvered ivy and moved as if touched by a breeze that did not exist. She wore no armor, only a tunic woven from leaves that never wilted. At her side walked a creature no larger than a wolf but built like something from myth. Its body was covered in scales that shifted between deep green and black depending on the light. Its eyes were the same green as hers. Intelligent, watchful, dangerous. The Virith took a step back. Their scanners flickered wildly. "What is this?" the leader hissed. Ellis stood. "That's Lyra. And that's Kale." The woman said nothing. She simply looked at the aliens as if seeing through them. The dragon, Kyle, lowered his head slightly and let out a sound like distant thunder wrapped in silk. The Virith raised their hands. Energy coiled around their fingers. But before they could act, Lyra raised one hand palm out. The ground beneath the aliens' feet cracked. Thin roots shot up and wrapped around their boots, holding them fast. Not tight enough to hurt. Just enough to say, "Stop, you are not welcome here," Lyra said. Her voice was quiet but carried like wind through canyon walls. The leader struggled. "We are the Virith. We hunt the strong. We consume the worthy. You are neither." Lyra tilted her head. "You mistake silence for weakness." Ellis stepped off the porch. He stood beside her, not in front, not behind, as equals. The Virith scanned them again. Their devices showed human DNA for Ellis, but for Lyra, nothing matched. No known species. No record in their vast archives. She was a blank space in a galaxy they thought they knew. That unsettled them more than any weapon. You will come with us, the leader said finally. To prove your claim. Ellis looked at Lyra. She gave a small nod. Fine, Ellis said. But we go on our terms. The Virith hesitated, then agreed. They had seen enough to know this old man, and his strange companions were not ordinary. Perhaps they were prey. Perhaps they were something else. Either way, the hunt had begun. As the black ship lifted into the sky, Lyra placed a hand on Cale's neck. The dragon rumbled softly. Ellis looked back at his small house, his garden, his quiet life. He knew he might never return, but some things were worth leaving behind. Above them, the twin moons watched. Silent. Waiting. The ship vanished into the tear in the sky and the world fell quiet again. But the wind carried a new scent now. Not just dust and dry grass, but ozone, and something older, something wild. Far away on a world of bone and fire, the Virith prepared their trials. They believed they tested strength, speed, cunning. They did not understand that true survival was not about winning battles. It was about remembering who you were when no one was left to remember for you. Ellis remembered, and Lyra never forgot. Together they would show the galaxy what it meant to be human, not just in blood but in spirit, in stubborn hope. In quiet courage, the ship flew on, toward war, toward truth, toward a legend that had not yet been written, but it would be. The Virith ship moved through the void like a shadow between stars. Inside its smooth black walls, Ellis sat on a cold bench, his hands resting on his knees. Clara stood near the curved wall, one hand resting on Kyle's scaled shoulder. The dragon lay curled at her feet, eyes half closed but alert. The air smelled sharp like metal and something sour like old blood. The Virith had not spoken since they left the quiet world. They watched from the far end of the chamber, their silver eyes unreadable. They had bound Ellis's wrists with thin bands that hummed softly but left no mark. Lyra and Cale wore no restraints. The Virith had tried once. The moment the band touched Lyra's wrist, it turned to dust. They did not try again. After many hours, the ship slowed. Outside the viewports, a planet grew larger. It was red and jagged with towers of black stone rising from its surface like broken teeth. Smoke curled from deep chasms and the sky burned orange even in what should have been night. This was Virith home, a world built on conquest. They landed in a wide arena ringed by tall spires. Thousands of Virith stood in the stands, their armor glinting under harsh lights. They made no sound as the ship opened. No cheers, no jeers, just silence. Heavy and waiting, Ellis stepped out first. The ground was warm under his boots. Lyra followed Cale at her side, his claws clicking softly on the stone. The Virith leader walked ahead, his posture stiff. You will face the trials, he said without turning. 3 tests. Silence, shadow storm. Fail 1 and you are meat for the pits. Pass all and you earn the right to be hunted properly. Ellis gave a small nod. Fair enough. The crowd parted as they walked to the center of the arena. The ground there was smooth and black like glass. In the distance, massive gates stood closed. Beyond them, something moved. Something big. The first trial began at once. A field of tall spikes rose from the ground ahead. They looked like glass but hummed with energy. The Virith called it the trial of silence. Any sound above a whisper would shatter the spikes into blades. Most who entered screamed as the shards tore them apart. The few who tried to move slowly still made noise, breath, boots, heartbeat, and died just the same. The Virith expected Ellis to go first. Instead, Lyra stepped forward. No, she said softly. I will. The Virith leader frowned but said nothing. He wanted to see what she could do. Lyra walked to the edge of the field. She did not look at the spikes. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Then she stepped in. Her feet made no sound. Not on the glassy ground, not on the air itself. She moved like mist drifting through trees. The spikes did not react. She passed between them, her arms loose at her sides, her hair barely stirring. Halfway through, a spike trembled. She paused, held her breath, waited. The spike stilled. The Virith in the stands leaned forward, some activated recording lenses. They had never seen anyone move without sound, not even their own kind. Lyra reached the far side and turned. She looked back at Ellis and gave the smallest nod. Next came the trial of shadow. They were led to a dark dome built into the arena floor. Inside was total blackness, not the kind you find on a moonless night. This was deeper. It swallowed light. The Virith released hunter drones, machines that tracked heat, motion, and breath. Their job was to catch anyone who entered. If they touched you, the trial ended in failure. Cale stepped forward before anyone could speak. He walked into the dome without hesitation. The door sealed behind him. Inside, the darkness moved. The drones activated their red eyes and began to hunt. They swept the space with silent precision. But Kale was not where they looked. He pressed himself against the walls, his scales shifting to match the stone. His breath slowed until it was barely there. His body heat dropped until he felt like cold rock. One drone passed within inches of his snout. Kale did not move. His eyes stayed open but unblinking. He remembered forests older than cities. He remembered hiding from things far worse than machines. After 10 minutes, the drones returned to their nests. Empty. The dome opened. Kale walked out. His claws left no mark on the floor. The Virith stared. Their machines had found nothing. Not a trace. The crowd stirred for the first time. A low murmur like distant thunder. Now the final trial. Storm. They were taken to an open platform high above the arena. The sky above churned with black clouds. Lightning flashed but made no sound. The Virith called this the trial of endurance. Stand in the center for one full cycle of the storm. If you fall, you fail. If you flee, you fail. Only those who remain earn passage. Ellis walked to the center alone. The first bolt struck before he could brace. It hit his chest and threw him back. Smoke rose from his shirt. He coughed but got to his knees. The second bolt came faster. It struck his shoulder. He cried out but did not fall. The third hit his legs. He dropped to all fours. Lyra moved to help, but Kale stopped her with a soft nudge. This was his trial, his pain, his proof. Ellis remembered things as the lightning fell. He remembered basic training on Mars. He remembered losing friends on Ceres. He remembered holding a dying comrade on Titan as the sky burned. He remembered coming home to an empty house and planting seeds in dry soil because it was the only thing left to do. He was old, but he was not broken. He stood. The storm raged. Bolt after bolt crashed into him. His clothes charred. His skin blistered. But he stood. Eyes forward, jaw set, breathing through the pain like it was just another day in the garden. The Virith watched in silence. Their belief in their own strength began to crack. This old man had no armor, no tech, no magic. Just will. And will was something they did not understand. When the storm ended, Ellis stood alone in the center. Smoke rose from his body, but he did not fall. The crowd was utterly still. The Virith leader descended from his high seat. He walked to Ellis and looked into his eyes. "You are not prey," he said slowly. "No," Ellis said. "We never were." That night they were given quarters, not cells. Soft beds, clean water, food that did not move. The Virith kept their distance but watched from the halls. They spoke in low tones about the old man, the silent woman, and the dragon that moved like shadow. Lyra sat by the window looking at the red sky. Kale lay at her feet, his tail curled around her ankle. "They do not know what we are," she said. "They think we are just another species to rank," Ellis said from his bed, another name to add to their list of kills. "They are wrong. Yes. And soon they will learn why." Ellis sat up slowly, wincing. His body ached, but he smiled. "You never told me how you do it." The silence. The stillness. Lyra looked at him. "It is not something I do. It is what I am. My people walked the deep woods before your cities rose. We learned to move without disturbing a single leaf, to breathe without stirring the air. Silence was not a skill. It was survival. And Kale, he is bound to me, as I am to the earth. When the world ends in fire or ice or silence, we remain. Not because we are strong, but because we remember." Ellis nodded. "That is what I told them. We are survivors." "Yes. But they think survival means fighting, running, hiding. True survival is remembering who you are when everything else is gone." Outside, the red sky darkened further. A new storm gathered, not of lightning but of thought, of doubt. The Virith had built their empire on the idea that only the strongest mattered. But strength was not just claws and fire, it was patience, memory, quiet courage. The next day, the Virith High Council summoned them. "You have passed the trials," the eldest Virith said. His voice was rough with age. "You may leave in peace." Ellis shook his head. "We did not come for peace." The council stirred. "Then what do you want?" Answers Ellis said. "Why are you here? Why hunt us? Why come to a dead world for an old man and a myth?" The eldest Virith looked at Lyra, then at Kale, then back at Ellis because we heard whispers of a power older than stars, hidden on your world, sleeping in your bones. We thought it was a lie, but you carry it. Lyra stepped forward. You seek the heart flame. The council stiffened. How do you know that name? It is not yours to speak, she said. The heart flame is not a weapon. It is a promise, a bond between Earth and those who guard it. You cannot take it. It chooses. The eldest Virith leaned forward. Then let it choose us. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly. It already has, and it says no. Silence filled the chamber. You will regret this, the eldest said. No, Ellis said. You will. That night plans changed. The Virith would not let them leave. They would take what they wanted by force. Lyra knew this. Kale sensed it in the air. Ellis saw it in the way the guards stood too close. They prepared quietly. Lyra wove threads of starlight into her hair. Kale sharpened his claws on the stone floor. Ellis checked the old knife he still carried in his boot. It was dull, but it would do. Outside, the red planet turned. The twin suns would rise soon, and with them a new kind of war, not of fleets or fire, but of memory against forgetting, of silence against noise, of one old man, one mysterious woman, and one small dragon against an empire that believed it had already won. They were wrong. Survivors do not win by being the strongest. They win by being the last one standing. The night before the final trial, the air in the Virith city grew thick with tension. Red lights pulsed along the towers like slow heartbeats. Guards moved more often, their steps sharper, their eyes scanning every shadow. They knew something was coming. They just did not know what. Ellis sat on the edge of his sleeping mat, rubbing his hands together. His skin still tingled from the storm trial, but the pain had dulled to a steady ache. Lyra stood by the narrow window, her fingers tracing patterns on the glass that left no mark. Kale lay curled in the corner, his eyes open but unmoving. He breathed so slowly he seemed made of stone. They had spoken little since the council meeting. Words were not needed. They all felt it. The shift in the air, the weight of something about to break. The Virith had changed their minds. They would not let them leave, not after hearing the word heart flame. To them it was a prize, a source of power hidden on Earth waiting to be claimed. They did not understand it was not a thing to be taken. It was a bond, a living thread between the old world and those who still listened to its voice. Ellis looked at Lyra. You said they would come for it, they always do, she said. When empires grow hungry, they look for magic to feed their hunger. They think it will make them strong. But it only shows them how empty they are. And if they find it, they will not. It is hidden in places they cannot see, in roots under cities, in rivers that run through dreams, in the breath of children who still believe in trees. The Virith see only what they can hold. The heart flame cannot be held. Kale lifted his head and made a low sound like distant wind through caves. Lyra placed a hand on his snout. I know. They are close. At that moment, the door hissed open. 2 Virith guards entered. Their armor gleamed under the dim light. They carried no weapons, but their hands glowed faintly with energy. You will come with us, one said. Ellis stood slowly. We're to the arena. The High Command has ordered a new trial. One final test. Lyra did not move. What kind of test? The guard's eyes flickered. The trial of truth. They walked through winding halls lit by pulsing veins of red light. The city felt alive beneath their feet, breathing in time with the planet's slow pulse. Other Virith watched from doorways, their silver eyes unreadable. None spoke. When they reached the arena, it was empty. No crowd, no lights, only the black stone floor and the towering gates at the far end. The air smelled of oil and old blood. The High Command waited on a raised platform. The eldest stood in the center, flanked by 5 others. Their armor was darker than the rest, marked with symbols that looked like broken stars. You have passed the trials, the eldest said, but you have not answered our question. What is the heart flame? Ellis stepped forward. It is not yours to know. The eldest's eyes narrowed. Then we will take it from your world. Tear it from the ground if we must. You will find nothing. Lyra said, because you do not know how to look. The eldest turned to her. Then show us. No, the eldest raised a hand. The ground beneath Ellis's feet opened. A pit yawned wide, filled with shifting darkness. Ellis dropped without a sound. Lyra moved to follow, but energy bands snapped around her wrists, holding her back. Kale snarled and lunged, but invisible walls pinned him to the floor. From the pit, a voice echoed. Ellis. He landed hard on stone. The walls were smooth and high. No way out. Above him, the eldest looked down. Tell us where it is, or he dies. Lyra closed her eyes. Do not speak, Ellis, I know, she said softly. But he will not. Ellis stood. His body ached, but his voice was clear. You think power is something you can dig up or burn out of the ground, but real power is in the choice to stand when you could run, to speak when you could stay silent, to protect when you could take. The eldest's face hardened. Then die for your choice. The walls of the pit began to move. Stone panels slid open, revealing vents. A gas seeped in, colorless, odorless. Sleep gas, meant to knock him out. If it failed, they would use fire. But Ellis did not wait. He pressed his back to the wall and began to hum, low and steady. An old tune his mother used to sing. It was not loud, just enough to fill the space. The gas swirled around him but did not touch him. The air seemed to part around his breath. The Virith above frowned. Their sensors showed the gas was there, but Ellis stood untouched. How the eldest whispered. Lyra opened her eyes, because the heart flame is not in the ground. It is in the people who remember. And he remembers. At that moment, Kale roared. Not a sound of anger, but of ancient power. The invisible wall shattered. The energy bands around Lyra's wrist turned to ash. She raised her hands and sang one clear note. The ground shook. Roots burst through the arena floor, thick and silver. They wrapped around the Virith guards, holding them fast. The High Command stepped back in shock. You cannot control this, the eldest said. We do not control it. Lyra said. We listen. She walked to the edge of the pit and held out her hand. Ellis reached up. Their fingers touched and light spread between them. Not bright, but soft like dawn through leaves. The pit closed. Ellis stood beside her once more. The eldest stared. You are not human. I am more than human, Ellis said. And so is she. And so is he. Kale stood tall, his scales shimmering with inner fire. The Virith backed away. You will not take the heart flame, Ellis said. Because it is not a thing. It is a promise. And we are the ones who keep it. The eldest was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps, Lyra said. But wrong does not mean forgiven. The High Command left without another word. The arena emptied. Only Ellis, Lyra, and Kale remained under the red sky. They knew it was not over. The Virith would not give up so easily. But they had shown them something they did not expect. Strength that did not roar. Power that did not burn. Survival that did not fight but endured. That night they prepared for what came next. Lyra wove threads of starlight into Kale's scales. Ellis sharpened his knife on a piece of black stone. They spoke little, but their silence was full of understanding. In the morning, the final trial would begin, not one made by the Virith, but one they would choose themselves, because survivors do not wait for tests. They make their own. After the trial of truth, the Virith gave them space. Not freedom, but room. They were moved to a higher chamber with a view of the red plains below. The air was cooler here and the hum of the city quieter. Ellis sat near the window, his hands resting on his knees. Lyra stood by the far wall, her eyes closed. Kale lay between them, his tail curled around his own body like a ring of living stone. They had won a moment, not a victory, just time. And time was something Ellis knew how to use. That night, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Lyra spoke for the first time in hours. They will not stop, she said. Not now that they have seen. Ellis nodded. I know they think the heart flame is a weapon, a source of power they can harness. They do not understand it is a living thing, tied to the earth, to memory, to those who still listen. So what do? We tell them the truth, all of it. Ellis looked at her. You have not told me everything, have you? Returned. Her eyes held the green glow of deep forests. No, not yet. She walked to the center of the room and sat cross-legged on the floor. Kale rose and settled beside her, his head resting on her knee. Ellis moved slowly and sat opposite them. Long ago, she began, there was a world not of stars but of roots. It hung between realms like a seed caught in the wind. My people called it Sylvanar. We were not born of fire or metal. We grew from silence and starlight. Our cities were trees. Our song shaped the rivers. We did not build. We became. When the great unraveling came, a tear in the fabric of things, Sylvanar began to fade. The roots withered. The songs grew quiet. We knew we would not survive. So the elders wove a final spell, a bridge of light through the cracks of the world. It led to a young planet green and wet with promise. Earth. We came not as conquerors but as guests. We hid in the deep woods and the high mountains and the quiet places where humans rarely went. We watched. We learned. We waited. For centuries we lived in the edges of your stories. You called us elves, dryad spirits. You forgot we were real. But we remembered you. Then the wars came. Your cities grew. Your machines dug deep. The heart flame, the last spark of Sylvanar, began to stir. It sleeps in the ley lines, the old paths beneath your world. It wakes only when the earth is in danger. Kale is not just a dragon. He is a guardian, born from the last ember of our home. His fire does not burn flesh. It burns lies. It reveals truth. Ellis listened quietly. So you are not from Earth? No, but I am of it now, as you are. The heart flame chose us both. You because you remember what it means to protect. Me because I never forgot what it means to belong. And the Virth, they hunt old powers. They drain worlds of their essence to feed their empire. If they find the heart flame, they will tear it from the ground and use it to control life itself. They will turn Earth into another bone in their collection. Ellis looked down at his hands. Scarred. Aged. Human. And if they do, then every green thing dies. Every song ends. The last memory of Sylvanar vanishes, and Earth becomes just another dead rock in a galaxy full of them. Silence filled the room. Outside, the wind howled across the red plains. Ellis stood. Then we do not let that happen. Lyra looked up. How we do not fight them alone. The Virth think they are the only hunters, but every world they have touched has survivors. Hidden. Waiting. If we can reach them, they will rise. Lyra's eyes brightened. You think they would join us? I know they would, because I was one of them once. Left behind. Forgotten, but still standing. Kale lifted his head and made a soft sound like distant thunder. Lyra placed a hand on his neck. He agrees. They spent the rest of the night planning. Lyra drew symbols in the air with her fingers. Maps of the Virth prison levels where captured species were held. Ellis remembered old tactics from his soldier days. Hit fast, hit hard, give them hope. By dawn, they had a plan. The final trial would be held in the great arena. The Virth would bring their war beasts. Massive machines fused with living tissue taken from conquered worlds. They expected Ellis and his companions to fall quickly, a show of dominance. But Ellis had other ideas. As the red suns rose, guards came for them. They were led through the city again, but this time the streets were empty. The Virth knew something was coming. They could feel it in the air. The arena was full. Thousands of Virth stood in the stands, their silver eyes fixed on the center. The high command sat on their platform, faces unreadable. The gates at the far end loomed tall and black. Ellis walked to the center. Lyra and Kale followed. The eldest Virth stood. This is your last chance. Tell us where the heart flame sleeps. Ellis looked up at the crowd, then at the gates, then at Lyra. No. The eldest nodded. Release the beasts. The gates groaned open. From the darkness beyond came three shapes. Each was taller than a house. Made of metal and muscle and eyes that glowed red with pain. They were once living creatures from other worlds, now twisted into weapons. The crowd roared, but Ellis did not move. He closed his eyes and began to hum that old tune again. Soft, steady. Lyra stepped forward and raised her arms. She sang a single note, clear and ancient. The ground trembled. Vines shot up from cracks in the stone wrapping around the beast's legs. Not to hold. To awaken, the beast paused. Their red eyes flickered. For a moment they remembered who they were. Kale leapt into the air. His wings spread wide, scattering embers that did not burn but glowed with memory. Where they landed, the arena floor cracked. From the cracks rose figures, small at first, then taller. The captured species. The forgotten. The survivors they had been watching. Waiting. And now they saw hope. A bird-like creature with feathers of bronze spread its wings. A four-armed being with skin like bark raised its fists. A small reptilian child clutched a stone like a weapon. They stood together, not as slaves, but as allies. The Virth fell silent. Ellis turned to the crowd. You think you are the only hunters. But every world you have broken has left someone behind, and we are still here. The rebellion began not with a shout but with a step. Then another. Then a wave. The Virth scrambled. Their machines turned on them. Their order shattered. In the center of it all stood Ellis, Lyra, and Kale. Not as prisoners. Not as prey, as survivors. And survivors do not just endure. They rise. The arena became a storm of motion and sound. The Virth shouted orders, but their voices were lost in the rising tide of the freed. The war beasts, once twisted into weapons, stood still as if waking from a long nightmare. Their red eyes dimmed, then cleared. They turned not on the rebels, but on their former masters. Ellis moved through the chaos not with speed but with purpose. He carried no weapon, but his presence was enough. Survivors from a dozen worlds gathered around him. They did not speak the same language, but they understood the same truth. They were done being hunted. Lyra stood on the broken edge of the arena, her arms raised. She sang not a song of war, but of roots and rivers and stars that remembered names. The ground answered. Stone cracked. Vines rose. The very air thickened with green mist that carried the scent of rain on old soil. The Virith coughed and stumbled. Their armor could not protect them from memory. Kale soared above his wings, scattering embers that did not burn but revealed. Where the embers touched, Virith soldiers saw flashes of their own homeworlds before conquest, of mothers singing lullabies of quiet dawns they had forgotten. Some dropped their weapons. Others wept. The High Command tried to flee. The eldest Virith reached for a control panel to trigger the city's final defense. But before his hand touched the stone, a small figure blocked his path. It was the reptilian child from the pits, no taller than Ellis's knee. It held up the stone it had carried. Not a weapon. A seed. The eldest froze. He had not seen a seed in centuries. You took everything, the child said in broken Virith, but you forgot how to grow. The eldest stepped back. For the first time, fear showed in his silver eyes. Below, the rebellion spread beyond the arena. The prison levels opened. The labor camps emptied. The silent ones who had scrubbed floors and carried loads now stood tall. They did not kill. They disarmed. They bound their captors not with chains but with vines that would wither if used for harm. Ellis found the eldest standing alone on the platform. The crowd had moved on. The battle was over, not with fire but with truth. You lost, he said. No, the eldest replied. We were reminded of what? That strength is not just in taking, but in giving. In protecting, in remembering. Ellis nodded. Then go, tell your people. The galaxy is not yours to own. It is yours to share. The eldest bowed his head. And we go home. Lyra joined them. Kale landed softly beside her, scales dimming to a deep forest green. The mist around them thinned. The red sky seemed lighter. The freed survivors gathered in the center of the arena. They did not cheer. They stood in silence, a silence full of weight and wonder. They had been nothing. Now they were something again. A bronze-feathered being stepped forward. Where do we go home, Ellis said. If it still stands. If not, build a new one. But build it together. They began to leave in small groups. Some took Virith ships. Others walked into the red plains toward the rising suns. They carried no flags, no banners, just hope. Ellis looked at Lyra. Ready, she nodded. Kale lowered his head so Ellis could climb onto his back. The dragon's scales were warm but not hot, like sun on stone. They rose into the sky as the last of the red light faded. Below, the Virith city stood quiet, not destroyed, just changed. The journey back to Earth was long. They passed through dead systems and silent moons. Kale flew steady, his wings cutting through the dark like a blade through water. Lyra sat behind Ellis, her hands resting on his shoulders. She did not speak, but her presence was a comfort. When Earth appeared on the horizon, it looked small and blue and fragile. Ellis felt his throat tighten. They landed in the same dead forest where it all began. The twin moons hung high. The wind moved through the grass like a sigh. Ellis stepped down and walked to his garden. The carrots had grown wild. The beans climbed the fence in tangled loops. It was messy, alive. Lyra stood beside him. What? Now we wait, we watch, we remember. Kale curled up near the porch, his eyes half closed but alert. The night settled around them. Stars blinked on one by one. Far away in the galaxy, stories began to spread. Of an old man who stood in a storm. Of a woman who moved without sound. Of a dragon whose fire showed truth. They were not called heroes. They were called survivors, and survivors do not seek glory. They seek peace. But they are always ready because the universe is vast. And not all who wander are lost. Some are watching, waiting, remembering. Ellis sat on the porch and poured 2 cups of bitter tea. He handed one to Lyra. She took it and smiled. Somewhere a new ship would come. Another empire would rise. Another heart would forget. But here in this quiet place under twin moons, 3 survivors would be ready. Not with weapons, but with memory. And that was enough.